Okay, this is English 201, week 14, part 2. So those are, I just went over paper 1, 2, and 3. So hopefully, if you have any questions about that, you can always email me questions or put it on the Ask Me Anything thread on the discussion board or come to office hours. Nobody comes to office hours. I just sit there at the kitchen table, just reading books and reading X-Men and hanging out. I got a lot of X-Men comic books. I have some people say too many X-Men comic books, but I don't think it's too many. I think it's a very good amount. Anyway, oh, and by the way, if you want to know how crazy I am about Shakespeare, like, behold all of my Shakespeare books. It's so many. Okay, so that's paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, and the discussion board comments. And paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 can be revised. The final assignment you have for this class is paper 4. Paper 4 is due May 17th. Paper 4 is pretty similar to paper 1, 2, and 3. It's not super different. It's the same kind of thing where you're going to talk about metaphor, irony, and theme. That's all we do in this class. I told you that first week of class I was going to teach you everything you need to know, and then the rest of the semester all we do is practice it. So it's the same kind of thing. Now, for paper 1, 2, and 3, I gave you like a speech or asked you a question, and you wrote your paper about that. For paper 4, you're going to kind of pick what you want to write about. But there are some rules. Make sure you pay attention to these rules in the assignment. You got to read the assignment. A lot of my students don't read the assignment. They're like, oh, I got to write another paper for English class. And maybe they glance at the assignment or not at all, and then they turn it in. And I'm like, this is not what the assignment asked for, F. And they're like, but it's a really good paper. And I'm like, it's not what the assignment asked for. I can't give you a grade on this. I don't want to be an asshole, but like, you have to read the assignment and do the assignment. Like, I don't know how to explain it. So paper 4 is, I'm going to say something bigger. Now, this is maybe something stupid, but you know how every single lecture you've seen me do is me with a poem or a play, quote, being like, look at this quote here, and then talking about metaphor, irony, and theme in that quote? The reason I do that, and I feel heartbroken for people for whom this is not obvious, but there are some students for whom this is not obvious, and I don't know what to say. The whole reason that I do those lectures where I zoom the camera in on a quote and then talk about the metaphor, the irony, the theme. I'm doing that because that's what I want you to do in your papers. They're supposed to sort of look like that. Every semester, somebody gives me a paper on The Tempest or Othello, and there are no quotes in it. Like, they don't quote anything. They're just like, Othello got mad, killed his wife, it made me feel real sad. And I'm like, do you want to quote anything or talk about metaphor, irony, and theme? And like, because to me, it's obvious. Since I always quote something and talk about metaphor, irony, and theme, that's what you should do in your papers. That's why I do the lectures, to model for you what your paper should look like. Most people get that, but every once in a while I just get a student who turns in something, it's just like a summary of Othello, and I'm like, did you see me doing that? I don't do that. The whole reason I do these lectures is because it's what I want your papers to look like. So the last paper, paper 4, is again the same thing we do in class all the time. You have seen me do this so many times. So oftentimes when I'm in a lecture, I will take something and compare it to a modern story. So if you remember when I was talking about Othello, I was like, hey, don't you think this Iago guy is a lot like the Joker in Dark Knight? Right? And I said that. Or I'd be like, don't you think Prospero is a little bit like Dumbledore in Harry Potter or whatever? I try to connect it to a modern story. So for paper 4, that's what I want from you. I want you to take something we did in class, Phoenix and the Turtle, Metamorphosis, Before the Law, Othello, The Tempest. Take one of those things. And not the whole thing, just part of it. It could be a speech, it could be a character, it could be a scene, it could be a paragraph, it could, like some section of it. Just something in there. It doesn't have to be the whole story, because that's too much, really. It's too much to write about. You can't write a whole paper on the whole. Notice how your papers were on single speeches. Like, pick a bit of it. So take some part of something we read this semester and try to connect it to a recent story that you care about. This is the important part. I'm going to say that again. Try to connect something we did in class to a recent story you cared about. Why do I do that? Look, some people teach Shakespeare like it's a history class, and they're like, oh, this is a metaphor from what was going on in Shakespeare's day, and here's the guy who was king at the time, and here's how that really. I don't teach Shakespeare like a history class. That's not what I do. Some people that teach Shakespeare are more like historians. I'm more like a philosopher. I'm interested in ideas, the theme. And one of the things I like to do, I tell you to do this with theme, is always to connect it to other things that have the same theme. I made this point on the first day when I was teaching. Um, anyway, I made this point earlier in the semester about how theme, when you do theme, you connect to other things that have the same theme. So for paper 4, you're going to do the same thing you've seen me do in class. So you're going to take a paper, you're going to take something we read in class, a character, just Desdemona, or you could do a speech from The Tempest, and you compare it to something modern. Um, now, a lot of what students do is they just want to compare the plot lines. This happens in this story. This happens in this story. Similar. This happens in this story. This happens in this guy, or this guy knows magic. Dumbledore knows magic. Prospero knows magic. Same thing. And you can do that, but you see how that's just stuck on summary. The whole point of I'll give you like a D on that. The whole point of the course, though, is metaphor, irony, and theme. So you want to look for more interesting connections. Is there a theme that is similar? What's similar about it? Why is it similar? Why is a play from 400 years ago got the same theme as a modern day thing? And so that's the basic idea. Let's look for metaphor, irony, theme, and summary between something we did in class and something you care about. This is all semester long. You've listened to me talk about my bullshit because I'm obsessed with Shakespeare and I'm obsessed with Kafka. So this is a chance to talk about your stuff. Now, here's a mistake students always make on paper 4. They go Google, what should I compare Othello to? And then they give me this bullshit paper that is about something they don't care about that they got off the internet. Don't do that. Just don't. I don't know how to explain to you, don't do that. Just don't fucking do it. This is what you want to do is connect it to something you care about. So it could be an anime. It could be a fantasy series. It could be a poem that you like. It should be something recent, some story. My students love anime. Go ahead. Make a connection between Othello and an anime. I've had students do that in the past. I feel like there's some kind of 7 deadly sins anime and they did something with Othello. I don't remember. But there's a ton of stuff. And there's and students often are looking for summary connections, but look for other kinds of connections. Othello has a lot to do with race. Is there a modern story about race that interests you that you want to talk about? And by the way, could be a video game. Could be something from current events. This could be from the newspaper. It could be from an anime, video games, telenovelas, whatever you like. Music. Feel free to compare a song to a speech from Shakespeare. I'm just looking for that kind of things. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Phoenix and the Turtle was about true love. It was a story involving animals. Othello, Kafka was this story about a guy who gets transformed into an animal. A creature. There's lots of popular stories where that happens. It's a story about work and capitalism. There's lots of stories about that. I'm Sorry to Bother You, Parasite. Parasite would be a good one. Oh my God, you could totally do a paper on Parasite and Kafka. I would love to read that because they're both about, well, I'll let you do that. Othello is about, and again, we talked about how Kafka could be a metaphor for being gay, for being trans, for being an outsider. There's a lot of fiction about that. A lot of Netflix series and things that you could write about. And again, you're not going to write about the whole Kafka story, and you're not going to write about the whole Netflix series, but like pick some parts of both and make some connections. Othello was about love and jealousy and evil and race. There's tons of stories about that. And The Tempest is about forgiveness. It's also about magic. There's tons of wizards and magical characters you could write about. Caliban and Ariel are like magical creatures. There's tons of stories about magical creatures. Plus, they're also basically slaves. There's tons of stories about slavery. So there's a lot. That's what you're looking for. And you write your paper with these 2 stories. You introduce both of them briefly. You make some connections between them. Some of the connections are going to be summary connections, where you're like, this happens in this story and this happens in this story. It's similar. But some of them are going to be theme or metaphor or irony. If you quote something that's got irony in it, you talk about irony. If you quote something that's got metaphor in it, you talk about metaphor. But like the whole point of the class is to talk about irony, metaphor, theme. So do that. That's paper 4. That's due May 17th. If you get it to me early, I will give you feedback on it, and you can do another draft. And that's a good, if you're worried about your grade, that's the best way to get a good grade. Is to turn it in early. I'll let you know what I think about it. You can take another pass at it. But if you get it to me on May 17th, we're kind of out of time at that point. I really just need to grade it. And on the last paper, I can give people A's on first drafts. But if you're worried about it, Normally, I don't give people A's on first drafts because I want them to revise, but the last paper, we don't necessarily have time to revise. But if you get it to me early, you're going to be guaranteed of a much higher grade. Okay, I'll pick it up in the next video.